Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. I'm delighted on a Thursday to be joined by JP Mason. I look forward to this all week, JP, because I'm not on the bulletin as often as I used to be, and I channel all my focus and attention on a Thursday. How's your week been? I mean, I know you were there on Tuesday. You've been busy this week. Fill us in.
Aye, I was, last Thursday, couldn't come to London with yous to pick up a treble, which, as a fan of the podcast, and that's what I am, I happened to be here on a Thursday and was quite involved with the matchday bulletins and the lockdown as well. I mean, it's just been a huge godsend for me as a Celtic supporter, as someone who's gone through this weird period of time in my life where I couldn't go to games, couldn't go to gigs, couldn't do my job, and having this to do has been hugely helpful for my noggin, everything. And people slag this off, people slag fan media off, whatever, they can do what they want. I don't really care, because ultimately I've had far too many people say to me in the last week, in public, online, the good things that comes from this, and some of the things you've shared with me as well that you've got from people, and not celebrities. It doesn't need to be celebrities. It's not about that. It's about making a difference to people, and it happens to be that it makes a difference to me as well. So I'm glad that us sitting here talking nonsense about Celtic and occasionally music, which doesn't go down well with some people, but I'm glad that that's resulted in recognition and huge, and there's no check in the post, but huge credit to yourself and to everybody else that contributes to this for dedicating their time and their passion towards something that we all are passionate about, which is that jersey, and what happens in the park on a Saturday or Tuesday afternoon, or whenever we happen to play a game.
Exactly. Yeah. No, everything you said though, JP, and it isn't sitting here talking about ACSOM all the time, but what you said there is spot on, because I just think that we've all been in company of other Celtic fans, and people talk so passionately and they're so well informed that you think to yourself, well, imagine being able to channel that into a show. And that was always the idea, particularly through the pandemic, because I don't know about you, but I need my Celtic fix every single day, and I know a lot of people are the same. So that's where it was born. It is a live stream. We've got loads of other things going on, Celtic related, on the channel, so get subscribing on there. There's my shameless plug. But the thing with the music, I know that when I start talking to you, JP, invariably we will talk about music at some stage, and a few people have a few wee gripes in the comments, but football and music goes hand in hand. It always has done. It's always been the case, and I'm pretty sure there's a wee music story in today's episode as well, JP.
The other day, Tuesday at Celtic Park was obviously amazing. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But in the evening, a band from Dublin, Fontaines DC, played at the Barrowlands. If people don't know who they are, they're maybe not everybody's cup of tea musically. They're not, mainstream pop. They're kind of pretty dark, influenced by, any number of bands, The Cure, the Pogues, there are others, Iggy Pop, stuff like that. So they were playing the Barrowland on Tuesday night, and to go from Celtic Park, a victory, to that gig was something else. And the promoter, Chris Beltran, who is not so knowledgeable about football, he won't mind me saying that, he sort of said to me that there'd been some murmurings from the Fontaines DC camp about trying to get to the game if possible, but their sound check was at 4 o'clock, so because we were playing at 3:30, it was never going to happen. So it was a bit of a shame, because in actual fact, if the game had been tonight, they have tonight off, so they could have gone to the game tonight, which is a shame. But it was sort of chat like, what can we do for them Celtic wise? And I went, let's get them Celtic tops, no sponsor, names in the back, year they were born, see how that goes down. And then they put a post out on Tuesday to plug their Glasgow gig, and they said it was Tom the drummer's birthday on Tuesday, so they said happy birthday Tom, and then they were like, Glasgow tonight, and of course Celtic. And then I saw that and I was like, oh my god, they're going to lose their minds when they get these strips. And they got them last night at the second night, because they did 2 nights at the Barrowlands, and they were absolutely over the moon. And I managed to see them last night in Nice and Sleazy's on Sauchiehall Street for a few beverages, so I'm a little bit worse for wear. But it was great to talk to them, and speaking to Green and singing afterwards. He came into Sleazy's wearing his Celtic top, by the way.
Oh.
Not fully out. He had a shirt on, but I mean, you could see it in the picture.
I've seen it in that photograph. Yep.
But I said to him last night, I was like, those gigs will be remembered for a long, long, long time. You know, people, that's etched in people's memory. Them playing at the Barrowland anyway was a big deal. Them playing in the Barrowland on the same day that Celtic have a big win in Europe.
Yeah.
And I actually said to him, I couldn't remember what game it was, but I looked it up this morning. The Pogues played the Barrowland the same day that Celtic beat Rangers in the St Patrick's Day massacre. And there's an article, Scotsman article, which I've sent to him via someone else together. I was like, this is the article I was talking about. And that's remembered fondly. I know loads of guys, obviously a bit older than me, that were there, and they still talk about, I mean, that day, you know, we beat Rangers and then Pogues at the Barrowland afterwards. It's 100% same thing, because you're not going to try and well, I know for a fact there was a lot of that crowd and on Tuesday night that were at the game, or if they weren't at the game, they would have been if they could have. They got the day off work or got somebody to mind their kids or all of that sort of thing. So, you know, big sort of week for Glasgow music, and an important date in the calendar that I'll never forget it for sure. You know, just as a fan of the band and a fan of Celtic, it was a perfect synergy.
Absolutely, and it's back to normal. It's back to JP's normal. The music, the football, you know, going places, you know. So absolutely brilliant to look back on, JP, because it is getting back to that stage. I know, you know, you've got to be double vaxxed and you've got to have your passport and all this kind of stuff, which prevented some people from being at the game. But for 50,000 to turn out, I remember in the kind of early days of the Celtic State of Mind, we were actually approached by UEFA.com, right? And Kevin Graham and I went down Gallagate and they wanted to film us. Unfortunately, as so happens so often, we were down there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. Kevin can maybe correct me on that. We seemed to be down there all day, and we were going to the game at night, and it was on Valentine's Day, I remember. And they were filming us, and they filmed hours and hours of footage. You know, Kevin reciting poetry down the Gallagate and all that. It was brilliant. They eventually used about, I don't know, a third of a second of it in their promo stuff that they put up. But the whole discussion that day was, we were in the Europa League, and the biggest Europa League game will be at Celtic Park. And the guys that were actually, you know, commentating or asking us the question, one of them was from America, another one was from down south, and they just didn't grasp it, JP. They didn't get the magnitude of Celtic Park on a European night. And we were saying to them, you know, there's a lot of big clubs in Europe tonight, but there'll be no place on the planet like Celtic Park this evening. So to then get that 3:30 kickoff announced, and you're kind of looking at that thinking, how's that going to affect the attendance? Ange Postecoglou, Joe Hart and others have come out and spoken about the impact of the fans on Tuesday afternoon.
Massive.
Huge. Absolutely huge.
And I got ridiculed on here in comments and, well, look at him, he's coming out with the excuses. I never ever said that it was solely down to the fans. I never said that. You can watch back all the footage, as some supporters of other clubs seem to do, by the way, and watch
regularly. Yes.
I watch hours and hours of this to try and find us stumbling over our words or something. Yeah, I've probably stumbled over my words a few times. Big deal. It's not exactly, you know, groundbreaking to stumble over your words when you're speaking live on camera on a stream. So, you know, cheers. Anyway, what was I saying there? I was talking about...
you said it about the fans.
About the fans. I said it about the fans, and there we go. We play Ferencváros, empty stadium last season. We have all the chances in the world, and we have... And we get beat, right? I don't know for sure if the same thing would have happened if we'd had fans in or not. But so many people commented on Tuesday. Tom English, whether you listen to him or not, said that the fans played a big part in the sort of the push and the patience and the drive and the energy that the players got. And I just don't know how you could possibly think that players wouldn't play better when they know that they've got people to impress. I just think that's a given. You know, if I'm playing 5s or 7s and there's people watching, you know, I would be more aware of what I'm doing. You know, and it's very rare that anyone's watching me play 7s or 5s, by the way, certainly not 50,000 folk. But I can totally get into that mindset of thinking that if a player has people watching them, then they're more on their toes. They're more likely
100%.
to have the audacity to pull off a pass like Jota. And, you know, I mean, that must have been, if I was them, I would have been replaying that in my head all day yesterday and the day and the night before. Because if I ever score a good goal in 5s, which is rare, I never get to play it anymore because I'm always working. But if I ever score a good goal, I'm always replaying it. So they must be replaying that, you know, in their heads.
We will definitely be talking about Jota and Kyogo at some point in the show, JP. But on that point, right, again, I'm sorry, I apologise in advance. I'm bringing music back into this. If you're performing on a stage, be that on a musical stage or on the theatre that is Celtic Park, there's an energy. There's an energy that emanates from the crowd. Of course there is. You know, the best gigs, you know, part of the experience is that synergy between the crowd and the performers. Now, footballers performing in an empty stadium, you know, you've only got to go back to the time where Celtic were punished after the Rapid Vienna saga, and we had to play behind closed doors the following year, didn't we, against Atletico Madrid? And actually spoke to somebody who managed brilliantly to get into that game by getting a steward's job. They actually had to employ stewards, right? I don't know why, because there was nobody at the game. And he got a job as a steward, and he smuggled in a camera. I'm going to have to find him. He's on my Twitter page. And he's taken photographs from the terracing at that behind closed doors game. Celtic failed to perform that day. There's television footage. There was a terrible chance missed by Murdo McLeod, I think it was. And Celtic failed to perform. Now, last season, JP, when you said it, when others said it, and, you know, Neil Lennon said it a few times around the fans and the energy and what they bring, people were just saying that's just an excuse. You're just looking for excuses. But I think when you look at Tuesday afternoon and the impact of the support, now, it can be intimidating for the opposition, of course it can. But every time I'm privileged enough to speak to an ex-player, I ask them about the fans, because sometimes people can say things and it's empty words, JP. They'll say it to try and obviously appease us. But the players I've spoken to are saying, you know, when the crowd are behind you, it does make you play out your skin. You know, it's almost like an otherworldly kind of experience. Andy Lynch talks about it, where his first pass of a game, if it comes off and you can feel the fans are behind you, it's almost as if you are watching the rest of the game, JP. You don't have to overthink anything. Everything happens naturally and you breed confidence. And I think that happened on Tuesday. It was tremendous from start to finish. It was great to see the banners. Big shout out for the Green Brigade with the Johnny Doyle. That was tremendous. A great tribute to a much missed and much loved ex-Celt. But I was going to bring that up, and you've answered the question. Going back to last season, I think it is absolutely pivotal that we're back in. And at this moment in time, I'm going to bring up a wee comment that's come in from Patrick Murphy on the YouTube page. Let's not get too overexcited after a few wins. As expected, during a huge rebuild, we've been inconsistent. Once we start racking up 10 plus domestic wins on the trot, then we'll be going somewhere. And I get that. I do get that. And I always have to check myself on, particularly the match day bulletins, JP, not to get too excited or too despondent, because you can go one way or the other when you're reacting to what you've just seen. But there does seem to be a bit of a change. It does feel as though we're clicking into a rhythm at the moment under Ange. I mean, the Motherwell game, it was far more controlled without it being the swashbuckling 6-0 win that we've seen against Dundee, St Mirren at home. But it was controlled and it was confident. And then I think Tuesday was reminiscent of the Motherwell game, on a completely different level, of course. Do you feel that we're finally starting to find our rhythm?
I mean, I was listening to Kev and Colin this morning, and I thought it was great yesterday. Really enjoyed the show from yesterday today. And you know what they were saying about, you know, Kev was saying, you know, maybe I kind of need to, you know, watch what I say, you know, on here or whatever, because you've got maybe a bit too downbeat on the back of the Livingston defeat, the Dundee United draw, and you know you kind of need to temper that negativity, or you know, call it, when you have massive positivity like you do after Motherwell away, Tuesday against Ferencvaros. I just think that it makes sense that we would be playing better by now because these players are getting to know each other. I mean, Jota even said, there was a quote attributed to Jota about the fact that Kyogo Furuhashi doesn't speak English, and he's going to try and learn Japanese to help him out on the park so that he can actually connect better with them. So you start to think to yourself, without getting too, over the top, you start to think to yourself, if these guys actually develop that kind of rapport on the park where they actually know what they're saying, that's a frightening prospect. I mean, at the moment it's football that's their common language, as you could see with that pass and the touch and the hit. But when they actually, are able to communicate better in the park, that's going to be happening all over. You see relationships building between Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers, the two of them plus Hart as well, where there's a kind of a bond there and you don't want to let each other down. And those things are all key to the whole team playing better, because if you've got all these little pockets of relationships that are performing better in their wee areas, and then that multiplies and breeds throughout the team. So it makes sense that we would be playing better. I'm not sitting here saying that we're going to become, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona or anything. Of course we're not, but we're definitely seeing the benefit of what's going on behind the scenes. And the more that again, I said that at the start, the way that Postecoglou talked at the start when he came in, the way he was talking, I was like, well, he's got to have the tools to back this up. You would not be talking the way that he spoke at the start. And I still think that. I still think that the way that he's speaking, you don't do that unless you think you've got it in the locker. And you don't respond to the media. You don't come out with quips like, I thought the championship was already over, mate. You don't come out with, that's a really negative way to start. Do you think we deserved the 3 points? I think we did. I think anybody with a footballing brain could see, or even with a non-footballing brain, you watch that game on Tuesday, you know that we deserved to win the game.
Yeah.
It should have been easily 3-4, and no one would have had any complaints. Certainly not Ferencvaros, because they were up against it, and they were really, really tiring towards the end because we'd ran them ragged. The running that we were putting in was. I mean, Joe Hart said it. He said we had to win today. We could not let these people down. There was no empty stadium. There was fans there. There was 50,000 people there who'd made the effort to go, and we couldn't. And he said we couldn't let them down. So that as well as the play, they've got the players there that have got the desire to get results and send fans home happy and proud of their team, and that certainly happened on Tuesday.
Just to go back on the subject of the fans, the importance of the fans, the fact that certain bands and artists and actors and people within the arts are attracted to Celtic, and we've just been talking about Fontaine's DC, who, by the way, sponsor Bohemian FC, or did sponsor a charity jersey.
I'll be getting them.
It's an absolute belter. It's really, really smart. And the thing that I was going to mention is, and it's not to bring up the award ceremony, but when we went down to London, there were very few Scottish representatives down there, to be honest. I mean, there were a few, but not many. Not many Scottish platforms were down there. And we were talking away. So we're at a table, JP, and we're at a table with a Dutch podcast who are based in Rotterdam, and they travelled over to London to come third in one of our categories. So, but they were all right about it, and we spoke about Pierre van Hooydonk, and everything was cool. But what they were talking about is coming to Scotland, and they wanted to visit Celtic Park. They wanted to come to a game. They wanted to experience these European occasions. We were sitting with a couple of fellas from Birmingham who ran a podcast as well. They want to come up to Scotland. They want to go to a Celtic game. It's one of these things. Now, we criticise sometimes the EPL for being this kind of tourist league, JP, but anyone who has an interest in football, anyone who knows their chops, and they come up to Scotland, they want to visit Celtic Park. They want to experience it.
Oh, absolutely. And I do get that. I mean, I've been at some Man United games where I've been surrounded by, genuine tourists who are filming themselves, filming their pals. They're not watching the game. I mean, Man United were beating Liverpool 2-0. Brendan Rodgers is Liverpool. at Old Trafford, huge fixture, and I'm surrounded by these guys that are all just like selfie sticks filming each other. I'm like, come on, guys, this is a brilliant game of football happening here. You could be watching it, like, instead of documenting it all. Take a couple of pictures, a couple of videos, fine, but to actually sit and film yourself watching a football match for whoever else's benefit, I've no idea. That doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, the Celtic thing, I think, is different because you've got these people who are just mad football fans. I don't really know what those guys were going to the game for, to go and see Man United, or obviously there'll be people that go to see Liverpool and Chelsea and Arsenal and all that as well, that go for the sort of prestige of going to see a football match in England. But those guys that you're speaking to want to come for the football experience. I don't think they're going to sit there and film themselves. They'll soak it all up and drink it all in and probably cherish that one game for the rest of their lives. Like, they might never come to another game because, let's face it, I've been to about 5 or 6 St. Pauli games. I would go to far more if I could, but Hamburg's quite a way away. And I would love to go to more, but maybe I'm even fortunate to have been to 4 or 5 to experience that atmosphere, because St. Pauli is unbelievable. Like, it's next level. Would recommend anybody to go and take a holiday to Germany for a weekend and fit in a St. Pauli game, because, well, you'll hear a lot of the songs that we've nicked for them. So for a start, and it's just great. Anyway, they're coming to Celtic Park for that experience, and they'll cherish it. No doubt at all that they would come. Obviously, if the result went our way, I'm sure you don't want it to be memorable for the wrong reasons, i.e. because we have taken some batterings in Europe of late, the Barcelona games, the PSG games. But we've held our own against big teams as well, Man City, we weren't ashamed in that game. We arguably could have won it. And we've obviously beaten other big sides in the past as well, Man United in days gone by, and Milan and all the rest of it. I've seen us beat ridiculous sides that if you'd said to me when I was a wee guy in the 90s, same as yourself, if you'd said, one day we'll beat Juventus and one day we'll beat AC Milan, and
imagine, and Barca and Man U all at Celtic Park.
No chance.
Fantasy stuff. Yeah.
Totally. So
it was fantasy stuff. Yeah, Hamburgs, brown and white. Yeah, that was a familiar chant. But absolutely, I would second that. Get in about the old St. Pauli culture and visit the Jolly Roger while you're over there as well. That's something you've got to experience.
And Thai Oasis, which is a Thai karaoke bar on Grosse Freiheit, which is open till 7 a.m. and is one of the best nights ever. It's just constant karaoke, and some people take it seriously, some people don't, and it's just always rammed, and it's a really good atmosphere. And I've got a fond memory of watching a young Asian chap sing "In the End" by Linkin Park 3 times in the same night, and was so emotional. He was like almost on the verge of tears while he was singing it. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. Hilarious, but also beautiful. So
I wasn't aware of this karaoke bar. I've never sang karaoke in my life.
You don't need to. You just need to go and drink it and enjoy the camaraderie. And if like us, you want to buy a carry out at 6 o'clock in the morning and take it down to the fish market, Paddy Kelleher stag do. Anybody who knows Paddy from the Edinburgh Heriot Walk bus, that's what we did on his stag do. From that karaoke bar, bought a carry out. 6 o'clock in the morning, took it down to the fish market and kept drinking until about 8. Crazy halcyon days.
When in Rome. a bit like the Fontaines DC, when in Rome. You've got to come up to Celtic Park and get your jerseys. Talking of music, I've never sang karaoke, but if you tune in to Scream of Celica, there is a tremendous intro song. You've got to check it out, JP, if you haven't done so already. That's our newest fully produced show, hosted by Kevin Graham, and I've got to say the intro music is delightful.
I need to check it out. And Colin said that it was a lengthy one, and I heard Kev say yesterday, it was like, it's because we did 3 games, so I take it he's only planning to do 1 game, and he just went into 3.
Yes, I left. I had to go and pick something up in Edinburgh. When I came back, they were still interviewing, and that was like You know,
Brilliant.
they were already an hour in when I left, but there we go. Now, the first time I brought you up, the Urban Cool Shay, I thought I got your name wrong. I don't know if I've got it right yet. You've only been commenting for a year, so let me know. And you say, apart from the game against the Rangers, we have played in 3 must-win games and won them all. A bit of metal building with this team. Signed 3 starters in January, and the jigsaw is completed. Now, it's a fair point. Now, when you open up your domestic campaign with a defeat, it feels like a bit of a disaster at the time, JP. It was the first time in 20-odd years that we had... In fact, it was the first time since Wim Janssen's season, I think, that we had lost an opening day league game. So, yeah, I can understand the reaction to that. Going to Livingston and getting beat is never ever going to be viewed as a good result. Is it a must-win, though? And I think I take that on board. Is it a must-win game? Well, you can claw those points back. Of course you can. But yeah, I take your point with regards to must-win games and the fact that we've stepped up. In relation to the Europa League campaign, JP, I'm still of the view, and I spoke about it during the week last week, that I don't want to lessen my ambitions in Europe. So when we started up a Celtic State of Mind, I still wanted those European nights that we've already spoken about on this show. I wanted to see us playing your AC Milan and Barcelona, Man United at Celtic Park in the Champions League. And because we were so dominant and we were strengthening, and there seemed to be ambition there, because when we started the podcast, Brendan Rodgers was in charge, we were winning trebles. And it looked as though there was an ambition there from the club to move forward, perhaps, in Europe as well as domestically. I did feel that, yeah, we were still a Champions League club. I didn't expect us to win it, of course, but we were still there or thereabouts. And success at that time for me was you always win the league, you try and win at least one domestic cup, and you try and get into the group stages of the Champions League. That was my ambitions in 2017 when we set up a Celtic State of Mind. What's your ambitions now, JP?
Well, in regards to the losing the first game of the season, I think I'd rather lose the first game than the last game. So, I mean, that's the way I would look at it. At least losing the first game, you've got 37 more games to pull it back. If you lose the last game, then that could be the difference between a league title or not. In regards to Europe, I think if we'd got into the Champions League this season, I think it would have been pretty messy. I mean, let's face it, we've come up against 2 good sides in Betis and Leverkusen. Leverkusen annihilated us at home. I know it wasn't a 4-0 game, really, but they still did it. The result will say 4-0 in the future. Then they go and get, tonked 5-0 off Bayern Munich. So it's a frightening prospect to think if we'd have gone in as the bottom seed in the Champions League group, who we would have got, and going in at this formative time in Ange Postecoglou's building process of a team, it wouldn't have been ideal. Yes, the money would have been great. Yeah, I know all of that, and that's fine. But for morale and everything else, people will say, "Oh, you only beat Ferencváros." Ferencváros were in the Champions League last year at our expense. Mm-hmm. They beat the team after us and then got into the Champions League. So they've been there, and we've not in recent years, not since 2017, I think it is. So beating them on Tuesday is great for our morale, for the fans, for the team, for the manager, for everybody. And yes, it wasn't a big scalp, but it was a win, and it was a much needed win, and everybody went home really, really happy. We wouldn't have had I don't think we would have had the opportunity to do that if we were in the Champions League this season. Mm-hmm. Next season, different kettle of fish, because Ange is a year into the what he's trying to do, and the team are a year into knowing each other and having the experience of winning games at a different level. That you then take that to, or you would hope that you could then take that to another level and see what happens then, because Rome wasn't built in a day, and I've never expected that to be the case this season. I've never, basically anything after last season is an improvement, and how we do that. If it's small steps towards that, then everybody just has to kind of accept it and enjoy the moments when they come along, because everybody enjoyed Tuesday because we've just been starved of it so long, and starved of being at that, having that experience of being at a ground and you know, doing the huddle and, you know, singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" and, you know, seeing with your own eyes. I mean, that goal, and it was right in front of me, you know. And I said, I realised on Tuesday on the way to the gig, I was like, he took that touch at exactly the same spot that Naka hit the free kick against Man United. And I'll screenshot both of them, and it was almost the actual spot where Naka pinged that free kick in, because it said that, I read a stat saying that Nakamura was the last Japanese player to score in Europe for Celtic, which is, you know, it's not exactly news, is it? We've not had a raft of Japanese players.
Kokai Mizuno no score in Europe, no.
Probably not. No, I don't. Did he score at all? I can't remember.
Falkirk away.
Oh yeah, you knew. Oh, brilliant! I'm glad you knew that. I just getting to experience those moments again in the flesh is what supporting Celtic's all about, you know. And I mean, my jaw was on the floor when I saw him take that touch. I was like, if he doesn't score this, it's, after the pass, if he doesn't score this, it's going to, like, everybody's just going to have their head in their hands. But it was the opposite. Everybody went absolutely bananas, apart from Colin, who was waiting for the VAR decision. But I heard him say that. that's so annoying that's now, like, stopping people celebrating immediately because they're waiting for VAR for an offside or whatever. That's the downside of it, I think.
That's the balancing act, and I'm sure VAR and whether or not, you know, it will ever be seen in Scotland is a discussion that we'll be having on ACSOM as we move forward. I would love someone with the technical ability to do one of those, you know, double screens and overlay both those goals, JP, just to see how close they were when they touched the ball.
Meters, I'm telling you, it's a metre or a couple of metres for sure.
It's incredible. I mean, there's some great comments coming through, and I am scrolling through pages and pages of comments because we're going out on so many different platforms at the moment. They all just filter into one comment section on the programme that we use. Because I've had a lot of our Facebook followers saying that we don't bring up many Facebook comments. I can guarantee it's simply because when I've just scrolled through about 3 or 4 different pages and I've not seen the blue icon yet for Facebook. So I'm looking for Facebook comments. If you're watching on Facebook, get commenting and I'll bring your comment up, as long as it's not too rude. Danielle Farrelly, I wouldn't like to be called mate of Ange. Absolutely. There is a great video circulating at the moment. Natasha shared it in the group this morning. And it's come from Australia. They've compiled his best bits, you know. It's like getting released from the Big Brother house. He's got his best bits, and it's with regards to the Scottish media. So they've already picked up on it over in Oz that he's getting a hard time. They're trying to trip him up, but he's coming back with, you know, responses like that, JP, not one to be messed with. But I'll tell you what, that fills me with a bit of confidence that he's like that, not just with the media, but day-to-day at Celtic. Because there's a lot of things that he needs in his armoury to make this a success. And you think to yourself, if he's dealing with Celtic's decision makers, if he's dealing with the board members, if he's dealing with the CEO, the interim CEO, in the same way, because I don't think it's disrespectful. I just think, you know, you're fighting fire with fire in a situation like that. If anybody saw the interview that I did doing at the Football Content Awards, it was a wee bit like that as well, JP. I just try to wind me up from the very first moment he spoke to me. But Ange's a lot better than me at dealing with that. But it does fill me with some confidence that he's not going to be messed about in any way, shape or form, is he?
Nah, and, you know, I occasionally see on Twitter, although I have, you know, muted several accounts in relation to the other team in Glasgow, just because I don't need that nonsense in my life, you know, people spouting nonsense. But Ange Postecoglou has been ridiculed since he arrived here by, you know, not so much the Scottish press. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's been ridiculed. Disrespected, yes. Not ridiculed, but he's definitely been ridiculed by the other half of Glasgow, who think he's our Kai Junior, as they like to, you know, often remind us. And they're all just waiting and I'm falling, and it's all, oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen. I can't be bothered with anybody talking about this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I just let life play out and watch things happen. There's no point in making big, bold predictions. You know, I'm not predicting that Ange Postecoglou is going to win the treble or anything like that. I'm just, quietly enjoying what is happening here, and I don't at all subscribe to the fact that he's an accident waiting to happen or anything like that. He's built something. He's taken a club that was basically at one point, as somebody described, a jigsaw. It was a jigsaw with only like a couple of pieces missing. He's taken a jigsaw that's been flung on the ground and all the pieces are everywhere, and he's been trying to put it back together. That's how I see what he's done. As a mouthpiece of the club, the voice of the club really has been him. They've won a watch in the fact that they've got a guy like that is so good with the media and so bullish. That they're kind of like, well, that kind of takes the pressure off us, and
it definitely does.
Also takes the pressure off us with the fans as well, because if we didn't like Ange Postecoglou, the board would be hearing all about it. Do you know what I mean? But everybody seems to be completely on board with Ange Postecoglou and willing him to do well. And he's mentioned that in all of his interviews. When everybody was trying to sort of say, "Oh, it didn't start off too well for you," it seemed like maybe the fans were questioning you, and he was like, "No. I've had the fan support since the start, and that is 100%. And I don't think anybody has gone off the rails about Postecoglou that I know, that to the point that it's like, "Oh, get him out," or sack him or anything like that. I've not heard that from any right-minded Celtic fan. And if I did, I would be wanting to have a conversation about it, shall we say?
Absolutely. See, the thing that we talk about, that holy trinity of fans, the club, and by the club I mean the board of directors, those running the show, and the football side of things, so the players and the management team. And at the moment, I think there's two of them. I don't think the club have the buy-in of the fans, but the fans have bought in from day one to Ange Postecoglou. It was a huge risk, JP. I mean, there's nothing wrong in saying that. There's nothing wrong in saying that if you're employing a manager who's never worked in European football at this level, because I know that there was a lower league position that he did hold for some time in Greece. But if you're coming into European football and you don't know the landscape of the game, then of course there's a level of risk. But I would always counter that by saying that there's a risk regardless of who you appoint. There's always a risk when you appoint someone at Celtic Football Club, and in particular with that jigsaw analogy, there was a few bits of other jigsaws in that pile as well, that we're never going to fit this picture, and hopefully in time we'll get rid of all of them. I think we've managed to move a few of them on. Jota has been spoken about. I'm going to stick to it. Everybody keeps comparing them to George Michael, and they've got all the Wham stuff and all the rest of it. I'm going to keep comparing them to David Ginola, because I remember after his press conference when he signed, and I came on and I was absolutely raving about Jota. You get a wee sense, I certainly do anyway, after speaking to someone at Celtic or someone who represents a club that I've been in love with for 40 years. You get a bit excited, and I totally get that. And I came on the bulletin the next day, JP, raving about Jota, and people were saying, "Well, he's only played a game, I think, at the time, or he's not even played yet." But what he's developed into, and I could never have seen this. Of course, I couldn't. Like everybody else, I looked at the YouTube reels and all that kind of, JP, because that's all I had at my disposal. But what I'm seeing is a guy who's developing into a must-keep player. There's been so many over the piece. Even right back to Dyla, so many loan players that have come in, and you knew they were a stopgap. You knew we were never going to sign Wakaso or Tonev or Berget.
Or Robbie Keane. We were never going to get Robbie Keane.
Yeah, exactly. It was a stopgap, JP, and you knew that. And you knew that their time at Celtic was going to be fleeting. Rami Gershon, another one, that was going to be fleeting, and we would move on and we would find something more permanent. But I think in the two loanees that were brought in this time, and by the way, that I've not even mentioned last season. You look at John Joe Kenny and Diego Laxalt. The player, I think, when I was looking at that last season, that I did like, and I think he would have fitted Ange's system, but he certainly wouldn't be playing ahead of Jota, was El Yunusi. I did like El Yunusi.
With Arsenal and Leicester, apparently.
Is that right?
Aye. Well, I mean, obviously it's just paper talk or whatever, but his performances for Southampton have allegedly caught the eye of Arsenal and Leicester. I mean,
and on an international level, he scored a couple the other week. Absolutely. But now we seem to have these loanees, and we spoke about this last season. I've had enough of the stopgap. Unless there's an absolute injury crisis, JP, I don't want a stopgap. I want to bring in a player with an option to buy. And we've got that on Jota. Now, obviously, when we were interested in him, when we signed him, some old reports were dug up about the fact that in January 2020, Benfica had inserted a buyout clause in his contract, which was astronomical. We can buy him for 6.5 million quid. The clause that was inserted into his contract back in January 2020 was 75.5 million quid. But I'll remind our viewers that, in Portugal, this does tend to happen when a player has that kind of potential bubbling under the surface. Remember, Ryan Gold signs for Sporting Lisbon, they insert a 60 million euro clause into his contract. When he finally left, I think it was for Farense. It was for a nominal fee. It was for about £1 million, So we've got the option to buy him for £6.5 million. And I think he, at this moment in time, from what we've seen, and I'm trying to temper my excitement here, JP, I think he'd be worth every single penny and more.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, you've got there's a clamour from everybody. I mean, so many people were posting and tweeting about that after the game on Tuesday, just saying sign him up. Calvin Miller, ex-Celtic player, tweeting saying get him signed. It was quite kind of comprehensive in terms of what everybody was thinking. Hopefully the player wants to stay. I mean, it's one of these ones where you don't want to end up with a player who doesn't want to be here. We've all heard that, and what happened after the Ferencváros game. There was players that don't want to be here. Those players had been at Celtic for probably too long and had, I said that last year as well. Again, people ridiculed me for that as well. And I said the players were fed up winning. They won 4 trebles, 4 domestic trebles. That's argued by some about whether or not we won 4 trebles or whether they won like 8 and 3/4 leagues. The history books say Celtic won 4 trebles in a row. And that, unfortunately, in today's game, for someone like Odsonne Edouard, that's probably 2 trebles too many. 2 back-to-back, fine. 3, bored, want to go somewhere else. And look at him now, tearing it up in the Premier League. And everyone's like, oh, where was that player? It was because he's got the hunger back and desire, and he wants to show himself on a bigger stage. And who can begrudge him that? He should have been let go when he wanted to go. There should never be a case where we're holding on to players when they don't want to be here. So to flip it, also, Jota, I can't remember the correct pronunciation, but if he wants to stay here and have a couple of years at tearing it up in this league as a Celtic player properly, then 100%, he should be signed. And if it's 6.5 million, we've squandered so much money on drops. Average players who've come and become very, very wealthy men from being at Celtic Football Club with little in return. He's already given us more than a lot of guys have done in entire seasons, and maybe even multiple seasons. And he's an infectious wee guy. He's one of those people that just looks like they love playing football. He doesn't do tricks for tricks' sake. He does them to tear defenders and wing backs in knots, and he does it easily. And the hype that was over Ryan Kent, at Ibrox. I mean, I'm sorry, this guy's absolutely blowing him out the water. His damage rate by the end of this season, if he keeps this up, will make Ryan Kent's stats. And I know everyone has their own opinion on stats, but his stats will be on fire compared to a wet mop in Ryan Kent. So there you go. There's a wee soundbite for somebody to clip somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is a statistical term that I've heard used a lot in all these analytical pages. A wet mop. Love it. People will be saying that I'm talking nonsense when I go back to Ginola, right? But the reason I'm using that, and someone will be able to dig out the game. I was a big fan back then of English football. I used to watch it all the time. Remember the Monday night games? I never missed a game. I honestly, I watched all the games at that time. It was at that period that you could have probably named the majority of every squad in the Premiership down south. I couldn't do that now, JP. My interest is 100% on Celtic, and everything else is there, and it's almost in the background, right? Unless it starts to involve and Celtic in any way, shape or form. And I remember a game at St James's Park where he picked the ball up almost at, a corner flag, his own corner flag I'm talking about. And he was able to play it out from that area of the park. And I don't think it resulted in a goal, actually, but it definitely resulted in a chance at the other end. And it was orchestrated by Ginola. And the fact that he's two-footed, I mean, Jota, that we're not saying that. We're always going about Moravcik, the fact you could swing a corner in with any foot, right? He could take a free kick with either foot. Jota's two-footed. He's unbelievable on both sides. Left and right, because Abada sometimes gets, fades out of a game a wee bit. You can flip him over on the right-hand side, and the crossing's as good from the right as it is from the left. So that's where I'm getting at. It's nothing to do with his hair. It's his style of play, the way that he takes players on. I mean, there was a wee show reel, actually. It was Benfica Youth, I think it was, that put it on Twitter, of basically every single bit of play by Jota against Ferencvaros. And you forget just how effective, because the way he was tearing up their defence. The only downside was the amount of balls that were coming into the box, JP. We don't yet have that player. We'll come to Giakoumakis in a minute, who I think's a massive threat there. Now, Kyogo's an absolute magician, and we'll also talk about him. He's unbelievable. He's been a revelation. That goal, for me, was just Kyogo all over. But he seems to get under the ball with the crosses far, far too often, doesn't he? And it ends up just flying high and wide.
Yeah, it doesn't stick.
That takes me on to the next point, though. Giakoumakis, listen, we've only seen 50-odd minutes of him. 3 fleeting performances, 2 in Europe, substitute performances. But he looks like a completely different player than Kyogo. He looks like he has a different physical presence. He likes a battle. He can hold the ball up, and he looks pretty strong in the air as well. It gives us a completely different dimension if and when we come up against a defence that we can't break down.
Well, it's like Cop. By the way, I just want to add in about my dig at Ryan Kent there. I will happily say that Rangers have, exciting players or good players. I think Nathan Patterson looks like a really good player. He's doing it at international level as well. I think, possibly the evaluation on him might be a little bit over the top so far, considering he's not really done anything and won a lot. But I think he looks like a good player. I don't think Ryan Kent is that great a player. I don't see Ryan Kent being a £20 million player. That's just my opinion. I know that fees are bandied about now for players willy-nilly down south, and they're, players go for overinflated prices like Harry Maguire at 70, 80 million and stuff like that. There's no way he's worth that amount of money, not in a million years. So maybe somebody, if crazy enough, if it's Leeds or whoever, might pay for Ryan Kent, but I just don't think he's that great a player. And then when you see Jota doing the damage that he's doing, it's just a different kettle of fish. But Giakoumakis, I got slagged by the guys behind me on Tuesday because there was a point where he held the player off, and I turned around to Sean and I said, I've not seen somebody do that for a long, long time in a Celtic jersey. Like, I'm talking like back to Hartson, like Hartson sort of, that was his meat and drink, holding players off, like the strength, and they scoffed at me and went, he's obviously got a bit to go to get to Hartson. And I said, I'm not saying he's going to be John Hartson or like John Hartson. I'm just saying his style of play is similar to John Hartson. And you're right, it gives us a completely different option. And I think Colin said it yesterday, we need somebody like that at domestic level when we go up against, big units, because every club in the league seems to have these guys that rise up and have a really good game against us. Like the boy at Livingston, is it not Mugabe? I forget his name, but the big guy at the back was an absolute unit for Livingston. And we need somebody to counter that. And Giakoumakis potentially could be that. He looks like he wants a goal as well. The overhead kick. That was a decent effort, and decent ability to get up and do it as well. For a big guy. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's this speculation and why did we manage to get him and nobody else did? From the Eredivisie, why did nobody else come in with the money? Sometimes that happens. Why did nobody come in for Van Dijk? Why did we get Van Dijk? I'm not comparing them. I'm not saying we're going to get anywhere near that sort of money, but sometimes you do win a watch, and if somebody's been scouted properly, you could get somebody that's gone under the radar. Somebody would maybe just look at him and go, oh well, he's only playing for, what's the name of the team? V
Venlo.
Verno. They would just look and go, oh well, he's only playing for them. Just like clubs in England look at players playing for us and go, oh, he's only playing for Celtic.
Yeah.
Why would we bother spending what they want? They want 10 million for this guy? No way. He's only scoring goals in the Scottish League, and turn their nose up at it. And then somebody does eventually take a chance, and on Eddie, for example, and he goes down there for 20 million or whatever it is. I mean, I think he will go again. Just like you said about Tierney going again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Eddie will go again. There's no two ways about it. His whole career has been geared towards going to a big club at some point and doing the damage. And Dembele's done it, and who's to say that Edouard won't actually end up doing better than his master? The apprentice might eclipse the master eventually.
I know. I just wish I'd seen them together for this season.
I know. We got that wee insight into it, and it was tantalising. And then he was away, and it was just like, God, that would have been good, wouldn't it?
I know. We'd obviously replaced him before we got rid of Dembele. We were thinking, imagine teaming him up. But when we're talking about the likes of Jota, and he's in on loan and making it permanent, again, just another thing I would say is that some players come here and they should have signed for us because their careers after Celtic taper off at times, JP. And I know that it's not an exact science. I know that Shane Duffy's gone back to Brighton and he's performing at his very best again, and he's playing well for the Republic of Ireland. Tremendous, and really tough for him. But the example is Paddy Roberts. Paddy Roberts at that time should have signed for Celtic. And if he'd signed for Celtic, you look at how his career's gone. I mean, he's still a Man City player.
I know, it's wild.
It's bizarre to think that his parent club is still Man City. It's just loan after loan after loan.
And they gave him a new contract and he signed it. I mean, I know that obviously people put money in front of you. You're not going to say no, but for his career, you'd think he would have went, wait a minute, I'm going nowhere here. I need to leave. Just find a club that you can settle down at instead of just being tied to Man City. And I don't see who's benefiting in that situation. Man City were clearly never going to give him a shot anywhere near their first team, but yet they gave him a contract anyway. Is it to fulfil some sort of English quota or something? I have no idea. I've not studied that in detail, but do they have to have X amount of English players on their books for FIFA? Or I have no idea. I'm throwing out ideas here. I have no idea if that is the case, but it just seems so bizarre that they would give him another contract when he was clearly not in their plans, not in their thoughts.
These guys have got to play. At that age, they've got to play week in, week out to develop, JP. And he could have been a player at Celtic. He really could. Now, I asked for comments from our Facebook viewers, and Anne-Marie Campbell comes in.
Remember the name didn't work before? It would always come up Facebook user.
There we go. Anne-Marie Campbell. You've broken through the barrier. Jota, Abada and Kyogo function well as a unit. There's clearly a great camaraderie there that was missing last season. It certainly was. We need to build on that rather than stopgap players. We want players playing for the club, not using Celtic as a stepping stone for their career. It's a fine balance, that, JP, because I sit and watch Sky Sports News on a loop just to keep up to date with what's happening in European football, really, and further afield. And you watch Edouard scoring against Arsenal, Tierney hitting the bar, Van Dijk training at Liverpool. We use that and have used it well. There's been so many others. Stuart Armstrong's another example of bringing players in and saying, listen, if you use us as a platform, we can get you there. So, yes, I don't like the stopgap option, and I use quite a few examples of that. But at the same time, there is a balance to strikes, because there might be somebody who has the potential, JP, and that is what you're saying to them. Look at the guys that have gone on, and not just to the EPL. Dembele obviously went over to France. You've got McGeady, who had a massive move over to Spartak Moscow, wasn't it, before he went to Everton? So I think we have to use it to our advantage. I mean, the biggest example I could use today is Giakoumakis, right? So Anthony Joseph at Sky Sports confirmed that the club were looking for 12 million euros had they stayed up. 12 million euros they were looking for him, right? Now, all of a sudden, because of his transfer fee, had he gone for that amount of money, would he have been more highly rated? Well, we know it doesn't work like that. You've only got to look at Albion Ajeti, who is becoming more and more of a distant memory. You know, we can't seem to do anything with Ajeti. We got him fit. He looks trim. Still doesn't work. Now, either he doesn't fit our system, or it's just one of these scenarios where the player doesn't fit the club, JP, and you move him on. He costs more than double what Giakoumakis. Listen, we've only seen him for 50 odd minutes, right? We don't know for sure if he's going to make it in a Celtic jersey, but the signs are good. But we're doing this with the same team, the same recruitment team, you know, the same scouting team, yes. And, you know, I'm going to jump back to one of the points you made earlier. It was a very good point about Ange Postecoglou taking the heat off the club at the moment. And he is, by the way. He really is firefighting on their behalf. The lack of communication we're getting in relation to the restructure, the recruitment, and all of these things that we're all concerned about. I mean, the silence is deafening. We're still not hearing from, and I know he's only interim, but where's the interim CEO coming out and speak to the fans? You know, it's just not happening, is it?
No, it's not. And yeah, I mean, it's to their testament, or to whoever brought Ange Postecoglou in. And by the way, when we were talking about that earlier on, it made me think of something I thought, you know, how we got led a merry dance in the Eddie Howe saga. So Eddie Howe's now been tipped to be the Newcastle manager, right? Is that been heavily touted, or have I heard that wrong? Or you know, you heard about that?
I've heard a couple of his ex-players, you know, talking him up for the job as well, JP. Yeah. So I think he'll be there or thereabouts. I think that any job that I think there was talk of him going to Everton, wasn't there? And he's an Everton fan and all this kind of stuff. To me, I don't think he's going to. That's his entry level. I don't think that's his entry level back in English football. So when a job like Newcastle comes up, I think he will be a serious contender.
But then it makes you think: is that why he turned down Celtic? Because this Saudi takeover, that doesn't just happen 1 minute and then the next day. They didn't just sit there on a Monday afternoon and be like, why go and buy Newcastle? I cool, we'll do it tomorrow then. That's been in the works for a long, long time. And you're not going to tell me that in the game that people don't know these things are going to happen. They just can't talk about it. So who's to say that wasn't already, that through agents or whatever, that they knew? You know, it's like a festival headline announcement, you know, within the music industry. You know, people know who is going to headline Glastonbury. Maybe not Glastonbury, that's a bad example, but other festivals. You'd be like, oh yeah, we know who's going to headline that festival, you know, 6 months to a year prior, because it's all planned. So this thing with the Saudi takeover, that now makes me think that is why Eddie Howe got cold feet and was like, well, actually, I've just got wind that this is going to be happening at some point down the line this year, and I'm going to wait and hold out for that.
That would be interesting. Complete
speculation on my part. Complete speculation. I have no knowledge on that at all. 100%. I'm just, you know, thinking out loud. But it would make sense if that is what ends up happening. If he gets paraded as Newcastle manager, I'll be like, that's what happened.
Well, the thing is, you can theorise, you can speculate. That there's nothing wrong with that, JP. And by the way, you're absolutely right. These things are in the works for a long, long time. And this isn't me trying to pitch one of my books, because if you want a copy, I've only got about 10 or 15 left. If you want a copy, get in touch and I'll send one to you. I'm not trying to punt them. They're almost out of print. But see the Andy Lynch book, there was an incredible, he told his football story, right? Here's a guy, Celtic fan, grown up, plays for Hearts, gets his big move, doesn't work out, manages to pull it out, you know, in a situation where he's had to change position to get a game. John Clark was the man that played him left back for the first time for the reserves. He goes on to captain the club, scored in the Scottish Cup final, etc., etc. Brilliant. And then he has like a swan song over in the States when it was the NASL, you know, when all the big players were going over there, and he goes over there and he ends up managing, and you think, oh, that's the end. That's a good football story. And at the very end, there's an incredible chapter, and it's called The $1 Billion Buyers Club, where Andy Lynch is approached by a consortium from Saudi Arabia to buy Liverpool. You've not read the book, JP, but I'll need to let you read it. You just read this chapter. It's incredible because it's the real deal. I mean, the reason they approached them was because they wanted, right, because Kenny Dalglish was at Liverpool at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was in an ambassadorial role, and he was an ex-teammate of Kenny's. So they wanted a link in. They wanted a bridge between these kind of faceless entities and Kenny Dalglish at Liverpool. And that guy was Andy Lynch, because they had played together for Glasgow United as 14, 15-year-old kids. Mm. And obviously Andy went away to Hearts, Kenny stayed at Celtic, etc. So that was the whole idea. Have a read of it. It's insane how long it took. And it didn't actually happen. The bid was made, etc., etc. But Andy was at the front of that. He did all the press for it. And it's an insane story. So it reminded me when you're talking about the deal, because he was involved in that for a good 2 or 3 years, and then the deal collapsed at the end of it. So you're right about the Newcastle thing. But I'm bringing that up because it's a Celtic twist on it. But it also tells a story when Andy Lynch was down in Liverpool. Is it Melwood, the training ground? I think it's Melwood. He was down there and he bumps into Steven Gerrard, who's injured at the time. And they get talking, and Gerrard says to him about his football career.
Gerrard flipped when he bumped into him, by the way.
Aye, probably. And he goes on about, you played with Celtic. I've got a Celtic strip on my wall. I've always been fond of Celtic. I've always been a big fan. This is true. It's in the book. Yeah. And the strip on his wall had Lynch on the back of it. And it was Andy's son who had played in I think it was the Ronnie Moran testimonial. And him and Steven Gerrard had swapped jerseys. So your managers will be Celtic fans. That's the whole moral of the story, right?
I'm sure that's covered up now for fear of reprisal, but that's pretty good. Before we go, I know we're nearly on time here, but I just wanted to. A few people have said hello in the last week. Just I've been out and about, including in the Celtic shop, I might add, when we were buying those Fontaine's DC tops, and the guy that was serving us said that he enjoyed A Celtic State of Mind. But my friend Michael, who I've been pals with for a long time, since '97, since that season, we met at uni. He's on the Heriot Watt bus, but I think they must have been sharing a bus with the Leith CSC at the weekend for the Motherwell game. And he was sitting next to a guy called John Matheson, who is a legend of the Leith CSC. We haven't met, but he's apparently a big fan of A Celtic State of Mind, and just wanted to say hello to him and to his mate Paddy, who follow Celtic, and all the best to those guys. And thanks for watching, and thanks for telling Michael. I'm sure Michael regaled you with some stories about our European exploits and exploits elsewhere as well, on the bus back from Motherwell. So I just wanted to say that before we ended, and I had to wave as we were getting cut off.
Another thing, no, but the thing is, though, it's so humbling when people just say, I like what you do. That's it. I really enjoy it. That's brilliant. Love hearing that. And I know these are never going to be universally accepted, JP, but there's people out there who watch it, and that's good enough for me, and you enjoy it. Just before we go, Facebook user, what's your thoughts on the Red Bull rumour? Listen, we need to dedicate much more time to something like that. I think it's it's a point that we need to discuss about Celtic going forward, and what does that mean for Celtic and the whole structure of that. So, yeah, thanks for bringing it up. We will return to that point and other options that might be available to Celtic over the next decade and further afield. Now, JP, as I say, I look forward to it. Yeah, there is a klaxon that sounds every time we talk about music. It's normally within the first 5 minutes, but there are also people out there who enjoy that chat. So thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments. If you're on the YouTube channel, then get subscribing. If you've bought one of these jerseys from the website, they're all in the post, they're all in their way, and we'll keep you up to date with anything else you can do to help the channel. But subscribe on YouTube, it's all free, and we go out every single day, and it's brilliant to see that you're still watching and enjoying what we do. All that's left for me to say, JP Mason, thanks again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.